Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to the STP training webinar series. The topic for which today is reshaping the test pyramid. Our speaker for the day, speakers for the day are Jennifer Bonine and Rick Faulise. I'm Smita Mishra. I'm a tester and sustainability enthusiast. I speak for STP conferences and like to host this webinar series for you. And I'm excited to host you all and Jennifer and Rick on our STP webinars. So here's a quick piece of information for all of you on the webinar. We have our next conference, Fall 2019 STP Con, coming up at Boston from September 23rd to 26th. It is also the 10th year anniversary of STP Con. The entire program is up for your review and registration. You can view the same at stpcon.com/event-schedule. If you plan to attend the upcoming conference, do not forget there are various discounts and offers for alumni attendees and team registrations. Feel free to review all the available options on the pricing at the link given on the screen. And if you have any queries, do email them at info@softwaretestpro.com. And also let me quickly tell you, there is an upcoming webinar. What does lean software development mean for testers? It's on the 11th of September. The speaker is Michael Hackett, who is a Senior VP at Logic Gear Corp. In this talk, he will give a full understanding of what Lean is and how it applies to software development today, particularly focusing on the impact Lean has on quality and testing. The link is up for you to register should you be interested. And if you are on Twitter, please share the conference information and about this webinar with your followers and connections. You can also add STP's Twitter handle to your tweets, which is @SoftwareTestPro. You can also please note down the speakers' Twitter handles, which are @Jennifer_Bonine and @Rick Faulise. All right, let's get started with the webinar today. So welcome, Jennifer and Rick. We are very excited to have you both with us today. And let me do a quick introduction for both of you. Jennifer Bonine is the CEO of PinkLion.ai, a breakout AI company that brings AI to the world's apps teams and delivers AI integration with a human engagement model while educating teams on solving challenges with an AI-first strategy. Jennifer believes strongly that we should do what we are passionate about in life and believes in living your passion. She has held executive level positions, leading development and quality engineering teams for Fortune 100 companies in several industries. In a very recent engagement, Jennifer served as a strategy executive and in corporate marketing for the C-suite. She is also experienced in speaking at both international and US engagements. She has keynoted testing and agile development conferences. You can typically see her at Google, Agile, and testing conferences. Rick Faulise is the COO of PinkLion.ai. He's a multidimensional technology executive and immensely passionate IT professional. He excels in the niches of methodologies and new platforms such as AI, mobile devices, streaming devices, TVs, and autos. He is motivated and inspired by the drive to contribute to the growth and cultivation of prosperous automation communities. With more than 18 years of experience serving as a management leader, he has also had the honor of serving high-profile companies as a QA lead and manager for both automated and manual testing efforts. As a leader, Rick's primary objective is to lead implementation of new technologies and expand the training capabilities. Now let's get started with the discussion on reshaping the test pyramid. Very warm welcome again, Jennifer and Rick. And the floor is all yours now.
All right. Can you guys hear us? Okay.
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thanks, you guys, for having us today. Happy Wednesday. We are going to use something that allows us to get a pulse on the audience that we have out there today, since we don't get to see all of your shiny faces. So what we're going to ask you to do, there's a URL that we have on the screen right now. You'll see it there. It's poll, so POLLEV.com/Rick F058. If you go to that URL, you can enter your name, and then you're going to be able to respond to the polls that we're going to be using during this webinar. So we like to use this technology. It gives Rick and I a good perspective on the audience that's out there and the 70 folks that are listening in. So if you could go to pollev.com/Rick F058, that's listed there again. We'd like to use that to do some polls today and get a pulse for you guys, the audience, how you're doing. Thanks, Smita and James, for having us again. We're excited to be here. And Rick and I, our bios don't sound as fun as what I think we do every day. We get to have fun every day, so we like that. We play with a lot of fun things and new technologies, so we've been enjoying that. You can check it out at PinkLion.ai if you want to see some of the stuff we're doing. We also have a YouTube channel that has a lot of the videos of some of the things that we're playing around with that you guys can see if you want to check that out. Hopefully you've all gone to pollev.com/Rick F058. Head out there and enter your name, and you're going to see some of the polls coming up shortly here. Again, it's just a URL. You can do it on your device, your cell phone, your laptop, whatever you have. You should be able to get there. All right, we're going to get started. We'll see if you guys were able to get out there. So perfect. So as Smita mentioned, one of the things we do is bring AI to the world's app teams and help kind of shift the paradigm around what's happening now in the space, given the access to the technologies that we have available to us. So what we like to say is when you leverage artificial intelligence, we have the ability to tie the people, the processes, and the AI all together so that what you're able to do is understand what each does well. So understanding how to leverage your resources in the best way possible. So you're optimizing the spend that you have on your teams. And then ultimately we can produce better quality software in a shorter amount of time. So we'll kind of show you some of the things and the trends that we've been seeing as Rick and I have been talking to various companies. But one of the main things, and again, a lot of this comes from the experience we've had over the years, looking at various organizations, what the challenges are, going to conferences, understanding and talking to people about what they're dealing with and what we're seeing out there. And one of the things that holds true, I think, for all of us is in certain organizations, we're not using all of the tools that are available to us in our workspaces. So when we don't do that, we're testing software like it's 1998 instead of our current day software that we could be testing. We use some outdated tools and strategies and technologies. A lot of us have legacy that we're dealing with. There's a lot of challenges just with some of the things we're facing, but hopefully today we'll kind of shift that mindset a little bit and give you some of the updated, newer tools that you'll be able to leverage in your environments going forward that will have a nice uplift for all of you. A lot of you are probably familiar with this, the test pyramid, test triangle, whichever you want to call it. We make it look like a pyramid, so it's multi-dimensional. But for a lot of you that have been in testing for many years, this was something we talked about a lot when we would talk about automation strategies in companies and organizations. And what it was based on was the idea that you target the unit layer and the integration tests, which are primarily your APIs, your back end, to be able to automate because those were the most stable. And we would automate those. And then you have the majority of your technology and your automation running on those bottom two layers to not have the cost of maintenance on traditional automation, to not have the cost of building the frameworks on something that was going to be brittle and change frequently. With the UIs usually being the thing that changes the most often, you're making updates to it, you have different things that come into play on that UI layer. So traditionally, we were saying, don't do a lot with the automation on that UI layer. Well, now with the tools that are available to us that have entered the market space in the last several years, that's really shifted this paradigm to where you can start saying, we could transition to what you see on the right, which we're calling the test cake, and it looks more like a cake instead of a pyramid. And the reason that is with the advent of AI and the tools that are now available to a lot of us to do things that traditionally we had to do manually, you can now do those as cost effectively as you can the bottom part of that traditional pyramid. So on the right, what you'll see is that UI layer that traditionally was hard to automate can now be taking care of a lot of it with AI. And so what AI does, you'll see those BVTs, that just stands for business verification test. AI can run basic smoke tests for you on mobile and web. It can do custom scenarios, so you can tell it what to do. It's not the traditional AI people thought of originally, which was just bots randomly crawling around on a site looking for things. But you can actually target it and tell it what to test on your web and mobile. And then moving up, once you get comfortable with smoke testing using AI and then building custom scenarios, you're then able to go into what we call the qualitative layer, which gives you, as a testing organization, more data to actually proactively drive strategies in your organization around product development and project management. So I think one of the things Rick and I are seeing, and I'll ask Rick, but what's really interesting to me is now we're shifting where testers actually have some data and information that is incredibly valuable around product, where users are at, consumer data. It's not just gut feel anymore, it's real data that's coming in.
And it's new data sets we've never seen before either. Now that you're able to actually access AI and let the brain, let those, the neural nets do some of that mundane tasks and take that work off your plate, it's shifted your focus, so you're able to start to look at new testing scenarios, new even theories on how you would test, and new strategies on how to go after and attack applications outside of the classic. And now with the AI, because the bots are not looking at it as in traditional automation, it's actually looking at it from a different perspective and how it interacts. It allows you to actually have cross-platform and even cross-application testing abilities, where you're able to run similar scenarios and get more of an apple-to-apple comparison when you're looking at two completely different apps. So and that creates a whole new data set that's opening up where we're not even fully aware of all the different analysis we can do on that data. So I spend a lot of my time right now just sifting through different combinations of data and kind of coming up with new metrics on how to actually analyze the progress of our application and stability of it.
So again, what I think you'll start seeing, another term you might have heard or you'll start to hear, is something called postmodern testing. And there's a white paper, I think, coming out on it. And Jason from test.ai did a webinar on it. So check that out if you haven't seen it. But the idea of this postmodern testing is some of the new trends that we're seeing out there, which include kind of this shift from the traditional test pyramid to this testing cake, and re-looking at how we tackle the challenge of testing all of the things that are out there for all of us to take a look at. So hopefully this gets you kind of introduced to some of the things we're seeing. But the first thing we want to do is go to that poll, so we get a pulse now for you guys of where you sit. So the first question we're going to ask is, what is your level of understanding of AI for testing? All right, we have our responses coming in. You guys can see them live there. We maxed out our poll responses, so we got our maximum users. All right, what we can see from this is most of you have some information on it. Some of you are saying, I don't know anything, so we'll give you some intro stuff too, just to get you guys a basic introduction. For those of you that have some information, we'll try and give you some new tidbits of things. And then for you extremely knowledgeable folks, at the end when we're asking questions, we invite you to give us some information. Hopefully Rick and I will learn something from you guys that would consider yourselves extremely knowledgeable in this space. Perfect, that helps us. All right, we will head to the next one. We'll clear our polls. Rick's using our live polling. Usually we do it as slides inserted in, so you get to see all of it real time. All right, perfect. All right, tell us what mobile apps you use or test in your organizations. Now, if you don't test mobile apps, you can tell us apps you use. You don't use any apps? Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I can't believe that. So most of us use something like, there we go, Uber. Yep, Uber would be one. Other apps you use could be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, right? Doesn't have to be ones you test. It can be apps that you just use. Weather apps, we're seeing that, okay? Again, enter ones that you are using or that you test. Lyft, all right. TestRail is an app. There we go. Perfect. Looks like we're getting responses. Facebook, Lyft, TestRail, finance apps, heartbeat apps, weather apps. All right, different apps that you guys are using. Okay. We maxed out, so we're at all of these. I'm amazed for those of you that don't use apps. That's amazing. You have to teach me how you get along without using a single app in your life. That's amazing. All right, what, if anything, is your perception of AI for testing? How do you feel about it? It's awesome, yay. Anything else? Anyone scared of it? Early, yeah. Scary, testing, much, automation, okay. Interested, okay. Skynet, we got a little Skynet there, yeah. Rick likes to talk about Skynet. You made his day by putting that in there. Perfect. Human, I love it. All right, so you guys can see some of what we're seeing. A lot of interest in it. Automation is a big thing, is what you think of it. Here's one of the things that I think is interesting that Rick and I talk about it as, and we'll see if you guys, how you feel about it. But one of the things that we talk about a lot with AI for testing is that it really has become like our virtual research assistant. So I look at AI and leveraging it in your efforts and what you're doing in your app teams as the ability to basically create your virtual research assistant and have something that gets you data and information so that all those things that you don't have time to do, you can leverage that to do a lot of those mundane tasks, get you the data, the research, the information, and then allow you more capability and time to be able to do the research and look at the possibilities. So that's something I think of it as right now, is really a virtual research assistant to go and gather a bunch of information and data and bring it back for you to be able to leverage in what you're doing every day. So what we hope you take away from this is that you're not intimidated by machine learning, what it is. We give you some basics so you feel more comfortable about it for those of you that don't have a lot of information. We're going to show you one of the tools that's out there right now to, if you haven't, go in and perform some machine learning based testing so that you can play with it on your own after the webinar and have some fun trying different things out and seeing how it works. And then hopefully understand some of the possibilities of what it can do in your testing. There's a lot of possibilities. Like I said, the virtual research assistant, but it does a lot of other things. And I think one of the important things is to think about, how do you want to start using it if you're not using it in your organization? Where's a good place to leverage it? And what are some of your pain points that AI could potentially help you with? So one of the things we see right now, just in all of our worlds, and I'm guessing some of you feel this as well, is that we've gotten more complex, right? Our apps are getting more complex, our websites are getting more complex. We have a lot of complexity that's been introduced by the integration of our apps to externalized apps that we don't control. Lots of different complexities coming into play. And at the same time, the speed to market thing is out there, and there's a lot of pressure to get out as fast as we can out to the market. And what that's done is created this coverage gap of, we don't have enough time to cover everything in a traditional way. And Rick and I talk to organizations all the time that just say, I can't solve this problem by simply layering in more people. And honestly, I can't even find the people I need because the market's so tight that it's hard to even hire as many people as I need to be able to do the work. So that's one of the ways that this kind of came about. And a lot of the folks that were pioneers in the AI space for testing thought about the problem was wanting to solve a big fundamental challenge that they saw people facing, organizations facing, of, we can't just use humans to do all of this. So how do we leverage the next generation technology to help us in this space around testing? So I'll have Rick kind of explain the basics of what machine learning is and how it does what it does, just as the background of what's happening behind the scenes.
So it's just to kind of I'll walk you through a pretty simple app, kind of a conceptual idea of a retail app. So we've all done some form of online shopping. Hopefully, some of us may have done it on an app or not, but we would fundamentally understand. So this is really just about how the actual app graph is built out and how how the bots actually go through and learn the app. So when we're out there, what we'll do is give it a goal, and the goal is to get to the shopping cart. And so as it goes through, the bot may go to a product page and it may navigate around and eventually get to a shopping cart. And along the way, it gets because it took an extra step, it lost a point. So overall, it's positive reinforcement learning, or reinforcement learning is the actual name of it there. And so that one run through, it got score 99. And in the next run, it may find a direct path right to the shopping cart. And then it says, hey, I found a better path. I found a faster path and more direct path. And the bot would then go through and map out every possible scenario on how to get to that cart and create a very big, complicated graph, app graph of your vector mapping of your actual application. Once it has that, then it has learned actually how to get around the entirety of your app and navigate from point A to point B. And once it has that map, then we go through and it says, now I need to better understand what's on the screen and what am I seeing. So it'll go through and look at all of the different elements it can find on the screen. It will start taking classifications of them and start grouping them together. And the bots have been trained to know that, in order to get to a shopping cart page from a scenario, a BVT scenario, I have to have some form of a product. If I'm going to validate tax, for instance, I would have to have some form of a product added to my shopping cart for it to actually calculate that. So it would use the graph to find the most efficient and fastest path to get there, with also layering in the knowledge that I have to add a product to the cart, and then it would actually go through and find what's the fastest, highest point value I can figure out to get from point A to point B and to achieve my goal along the way. With the screen classifiers and the elements, it doesn't do it in classic automation. That's the new advantage, and that's where the stability comes in, and that's where everything gets to become kind of makes me just sit back and wonder where this was 20 years ago when I was first starting automation and struggling every time somebody relabeled their handles on their objects and made me struggle and rewrite entire frameworks, because they're doing it all visually. It's doing it from what the bot sees and understands from the screen. So it uses what's called computer vision to take what it can find on the actual app or screen and slices and dices it up as to what it actually thinks are objects along the way. We'll get to that. I won't dive too deep yet. We'll get to that piece there. Sorry, jumping a little early. But a fun piece of it is, because the bots are doing things visually, the same scenario can be run against any different application. It can be run against any different device. And the screen sizes don't matter. How it changes, the bots just recognize things are slightly in a different spot, but it still understands the app graph. It still understands your vector map. It still knows your objects. It still knows where they are. It's just changing how you're interacting. So this is an instance here that Jason tweeted this out a while ago now, actually, of one scenario that he's running on all of these different types of devices, and it's the same scenario. It's all running successfully. There's no hiccups. There's no problems with the bots. There's no anything.
And they're actually getting smarter as they do this. So the interesting part is, if any of you have ever seen some of the folks that are working on these bots, or these agents now, as a lot of people are calling them, what happens is the bots will find things they didn't even know. And for a lot of us, one of the big questions Rick and I get a lot is, we don't have good documentation on our app, our mobile, or our website. How do we know what's all out there? What are the good scenarios we have to chase after? What's most important? And the bots do that. They do that vector mapping. They figure out what you have, where to go, what the potential paths are that you can take, things we might not even have thought of. So what we like to say is, watching them and actually seeing what they did, in certain instances will teach us some things we maybe didn't know, or different ways to look at the problem than how we're looking at it as it's learning, and is going around and checking things out. Now, what is also interesting that Rick and I find when we talk to people is when they see these videos running, they're like, oh, it's just record playback. That's not at all what it's doing. And it's much, much different than that. While it may look like that to you just on the surface, all of this that's running that you're seeing, doesn't require the code base. So even without the code to your application, because it's not looking at the DOM layer and it's looking at the visual layer, you can write these tests without ever touching or needing your code to be able to do that. Now, with certain things like financial apps that require specific logins or social security numbers, obviously we need those. We're not in the habit of giving the bots our social security numbers to run around and do things as a practice, so we don't do that. But for most apps that are pretty publicly available, like say one of the ride sharing apps that we might use, you can go in there and write automation on those apps in under a few hours, basically letting the bots run around, perform some tests. The uplift on it is so much different than what we were seeing in traditional automation. I mean, where it was 6, 9, 12 months to get to this, I mean, it's doing this in under a day.
Handful of hours. Just with the rideshare app, so if you're doing that, make sure you're not actually ordering rides. They get a little annoyed.
Yeah, we were on we were somewhere and we actually wrote an app that had it order a drink where you could order a drink, and the bot ordered a drink and we got it and we were like, well, we have to be careful because it keeps ordering drinks and we don't need that many drinks. So one of the other interesting things about how to think about this is it's the idea of the human brain. So testing app flows like a person. So it's the liberal arts part. We don't have to just randomly crawl stuff and let the bots just do their thing and crawl. We can actually give it input. So it can take in human input from us of what we want to test, and you can tell it exactly what to do if you want and have it do it the way that you would like it to be tested, but it's at superhuman speed. So now instead of having to test all those flows by ourselves or run it in 6 environments and run it on multiple operating systems, multiple devices, the bots are taking care of all of that for us at this superhuman speed, happening simultaneously, getting us that information back, becoming that virtual assistant that goes and does all that work, and then we get all that data back to go through and figure out what it means and where we need to focus and really do more of the testing that makes sense to have humans focus on.
And one of the shifts that that I like to point out is that the bots, they do a random crawl, and they're doing a random crawl to build that app graph. But once that's built out, it really can change. We talk about changing how you actually approach testing. And the difference is you can give the goal for the bot to get to somewhere deep in your application. And then if we're not concerned about the actual path it takes, you can just let the bot go and do its own path and find its own way, which is starting to change how we're doing it. And we can then drop a few kind of, I call them coins, but like a few goals along the path as well. So get to this is the end goal we're trying to achieve, but make sure to make a pit stop at these 2 spots for verification points. And we don't care about the rest of it, which means if your app flow changes, if the dynamics change, they add different things in, it really lets you get kind of creative with your test case writing, because now you're structuring your tests not as in a step-by-step guide, which is still an option. You can still say, I want my bot to go step-by-step all the way through the app, but you no longer need to do that. So your documentation gets lighter, and now you're just looking at the results to say, hey, how do I look at how the bot got through the app, and what % of my actual app graph is covered? What my vector map, I need to make sure I hit every path, so let's run scenarios to try them all out. And that's where I'm saying it's changing all of our perspective on this, because now your coverage percentages are all shifting based on what you can actually find. So if there are hidden screens and stuff like that, those things start popping up, which are now all of a sudden we didn't know they were there, or they were hidden. They were add-ins that no one should have been able to find, but the bot did find it. It is kind of uncovering some things that are just changing how we fundamentally look at testing.
And then one of the other shifts, right? So a lot of us got worried for a long time about, I have to check all the operating systems and I have to run it on all these different form factors. So I'm going to run it on tablets and large screen and small screen, and I'm going to run it on all these different versions and iOS and Android, and I'm going to run it on 4 different Android devices and 15 different iOS devices, right? Whatever it was that you were doing. And now you can shift that around and let the bots do all of that heavy lifting on all of the OSs and the devices. And what you also start to see is patterns. So you can figure out, because again, we used to test on all the operating systems and all the devices, because when devices first came out and mobile first came out, it was brittle and it was new technology and things weren't figured out. But some of this tech that we're actually talking about today and that's now available to enterprise teams like yourselves, that wasn't before has been in use by device manufacturers, the telcos, and the large app stores like Apple and Google for a while. So they've been using this AI behind the scenes to do their heavy lifting and do a lot of this work. So what you should start to see is, while you think you have to still run all these operating systems, all these devices, when you actually have AI checking all of it regularly, pulling all that data and information, you can start to say, how long has it been since I've actually had an issue on this Android device or this iOS device?
Are we running tests on all these devices because we're catching things, or are we running them because it's just habit and we're used to doing it?
Right, and so really thinking about that.
Yeah, and I mean, in the last 2 years, I was about to say, over the last 2 years, there's been a very large push on the Android side of the world to try to stabilize cross-platform. That was one of the big strengths of Apple since the beginning, was how they locked that down and try to keep stability there as much as possible across devices and platforms. And now Android's doing the exact same thing. So there's been a big decrease, I think, in the volume of defects that are because of device-specific issues in the last, I would say, year. It's been a big decrease.
Yeah.
And they're continuing that effort too. They are trying to get there.
Yeah, and like we said, a lot of those companies have had access to these tools that are now just coming out that you're getting access to. So they caught on to this a couple years ago and have been leveraging it to their advantage. Now it's all of your turn to start getting to play with these tools that have made, what they do, which if you think about how many apps roll through an app store every single day for approval, right? They have to have a creative way to do it. You can't just load in armies of people to test all the apps that they get every single day.
To go a little bit deeper into how the bots are actually interacting with what they're seeing. So I kind of touched on it a bit earlier, and I'll go a little deeper. But when you look at the elements there in that little box on the left, everyone looks at those and sees and just fundamentally knows, oh, those are all shopping carts. I don't have to see them all. I don't have to look at each individual one. We just instinctively know. And that's what the bots have been doing right now, is they've been trained on all the different variations to start to see that pattern that looks like a shopping cart. They now know what that is. And there's a brain, and the brain behind it, the neural net, there is actually a neural net that says, when I see this icon, I understand fundamentally what that means. It means it's a retail app. It means I'm going to have a product page. It means I'm going to have advertisements. I'm going to have a checking out. I'm going to probably have a login and account creation. And it fires up and triggers a whole bunch of thought process on the bot side of the fence to better understand what it's seeing when it sees those apps. And so what they've done is they're classifying every different type of object they can get their hands on, these AI companies out there. And so I know a lot of them will brag about the number they've gone through, but I know the last time I heard was Test AI was over 70,000 different apps they've ingested in to recognize and ingest all the objects. But once they've ingested those objects and they have kind of this great knowledge and fundamental understanding of what it is they're going to interact with and how they work with it, then it's about, let's go through and look at the user flow. And that's where we'll then define, hey, this is our goal of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to test. So yes, I understand, based on the fact I found a shopping cart, that there are some the BBT tests that I should test a product page, I should test an advertisement, I should test login, and a few basic smoked style scenarios. But outside of that, what else do we want to know? What are the other flows that we're trying to get our customers to go down? And let's have the bots take a look at those. And they're starting to then try to push those out across all of the apps that they're seeing. And that's kind of the interesting thing too. Well, we'll get to that later. Sorry, I keep jumping out of myself. So I had touched on a little bit earlier about computer vision. And this is a great example of how the bot takes a screen and it slices and dices what it can see into all the different components that it believes are a button or a drop down or a checkbox or whatever it might be that it's going to interact with. And when it does that, then it uses NLP to take a look at the text that's associated on the screen, not what's on the back end on the DOM or anything like that, but it's looking at what it can see on the screen to actually grab it to then make decisions based on what those buttons are. So that way, for instance, if you have a My Account button, it's going to find that My Account button. And if you decide to change it from a circle to a triangle or whatever you want to change it to, it doesn't matter. The bots go, hey, it's no longer a My Account blue circle, now it's a pink triangle. I'll find it, I'll deal with it, and just continue to move on. So that's, again, another layer on how it decreases the need on that maintenance cost, because as you're changing things, it's just like us. If I log into an app that routinely updates, if they change things around, it doesn't bother me. I'm still able to log in. I'm still able to find the login button or an add a reservation button or whatever I might be doing. I can still find it if they change the color, shape, and size. Same as the bots.
And then one of the cool things I think is any of you in the gaming space or any of you that play video games or are gamers in general, something that's a fact in the world today is that formerly Unity and Unreal as engines, even if you wanted to use traditional automation on those, it just didn't work because of how the game's built in those platforms. So for the first time ever this summer, we partnered and worked with one of the AI companies, and Test.ai now can run on Unreal and Unity. It's the only one in the world that can do it, but you now have the capability to actually run inside those video games. Because think about what's happening in a video game, right? That traditional automation, you don't know what's going to happen, so you can't code for everything that's going to happen in a video game. It's constantly changing. You don't know what it's going to be. You have to bring in new elements all the time, new art, new screens, new everything. So it's a constantly updating technology. And so AI now gives the ability for all of the gaming companies, instead of having to manually have people play these games all the time, to be able to actually use artificial intelligence and machine learning through computer vision to test those games. So that's going to update and create an enhanced quality of gaming experience for a lot of the folks out there. The other thing we can actually do with that that's really interesting is something that we call the voice of the customer, the sentiment bot, which crawl all of your reviews on your game or your app or your website, bring them back together and synthesize what the main areas of concern are for you. So is it, I buy things in the store and they don't render in the game? I'm not seeing the axe I bought show up in my game. I'm not seeing the skin I bought show up in my game. Those types of things where there's thousands and thousands of different permutations of what it could be can all be done using artificial intelligence. You can have smart ways to focus your testing based on the sentiment bot or the bot that crawls and basically looks at what your customer concerns are. Gives you information also on what customers like. So if customers really like an aspect of something, then you know, oh, we probably shouldn't maybe mess with that because they're really saying this is what they love about this game or using this app. So that's something that's never been there before, that's brand new, that's available to everyone now. For you guys that aren't familiar with what's out there for technologies in this space, it changes, as Rick and I say, daily, right? I mean, we just updated a new one again. But what we tried to do here is just give you some of the common ones that you're maybe seeing out there and give you what it supports from a platform and environment, a test type, test creation, test execution, reporting, and then what type of artificial intelligence it's actually using behind the scenes. As Rick and I like to say, there's a lot of stuff out there that labeled their stuff as AI, because AI doesn't, I mean, it's hard to nail it down in this space of what it actually is, and to get, it's kind of like, everyone remember when they started calling things organic, and you were like, is it really organic? Is it not organic? What does organic mean? How organic is it? That's kind of how AI is, I would say, a little bit right now in this space.
AI is not a defined term at this point, so a lot of people use it as a generic term for a lot of different things. So it's something to definitely be very careful about when people are claiming they're doing AI, because it may not be true. You know, there may not actually be a neural net thinking it through, and they're never going to be actually fully open. So that's what some of those NAs on the bottom are about, is because they're claiming it's secret sauce and they don't want to let us know what's behind the scenes of how they're actually running, because there's a lot of different options. But some people are wide open with letting us tell us exactly how it's doing it. So it's more, make sure to be very conscientious when you're looking at tools, when they're claiming AI, you know, ask the question. And the one that I always ask is, to me, AI is something that's thinking. It's making rational thought, not answering an if-then condition. Yep. So that's a big one to me, is saying, you know, hey, how are you actually thinking? What kind of, you know, did you build a neural net? Are you using TensorFlow? What's going on? You know, and you don't have to tell me exactly all the math behind what you've structured and built out, but at least tell me, you know, are you using trig or algebra? You know, that there's kind of the inclination that our people are, you know, kind of using the term a little generously in their marketing.
And then this helps you a little bit too to decide what you need, right? So, for example, some of these don't support web and mobile. Some of them just support web, some support mobile, some support APIs, some don't, some are just your UI layer, some are UI and performance. They use different ways they create the test. There's test execution. The actual where you get the data and information is different. Some of it's all cloud-based. Some of it resides behind your firewall. For those of you that require secure data, we always say look at things that allow you to run local because you probably need it inside your network. You don't want it outside. For those of you that have real strict around data and security and all of those pieces. So all things to consider, but and again, what I will tell you is this chart gets updated daily. So hourly, there you go, hourly. So it changes, but this at least gives you what I would look at it as a starting point to figure out where things are at today, at least. And then you'll notice the two on the left. So test.ai and retest tend to have the most robust when we look at them. If we flip to the next one, you'll see it even more when we give you a visual of it. Why that is, so Test AI has been around the longest. It's about 5 years. Jason jumped into this space before anyone else did. Jeremy from Retest was next. He's been working on it for a long time over in Germany. So Retest is a German-based company. They just launched a new piece of their product last week or the week before. It was very recently in the last 10 days. So what you will see in this space is a lot of movement and a lot of changes around what people do and how they do it, new players coming in. Rick and I did a webinar similar to this one last week for Europe, and we had to add Bitbar because that's a new one that's been out there that's kind of gaining some traction, but as you can see, it's a newer player. So again, the ones on the left, Test AI, Retest, they have more, they check a lot of boxes just because they've been there longer. They've been working on this a while. Kind of the full stack tools, as you would call it, where they do a lot of different things. And then some other tools are very focused. Like you look at Applet tools and it's very focused on visual recognition and visual diffing, whereas some of the other tools do other pieces, right? So it just depends on if you need a very specific tool or if you want one that does multiple things and what you're gonna go after for your AI and where you wanna focus it. But this is just to give you, an idea. And what we would say for all of you, I guess, is if you don't have one, looking at how you interject AI into your strategy and making sure you have a plan for how to start leveraging it. Because again, back like we said in the beginning of this webinar, we shouldn't be testing like we don't have the capability to leverage these tools. And one of the analogies I use for this for teams is, if anyone remembers the book Moneyball and Michael Lewis, who wrote the book Moneyball, and it was around analytics in professional sports. And in baseball, the team started using an analytics-driven program to define how they played the game, who they played, when they played them, what it looked like. They would analyze all the data and leverage that to develop their strategy for the game. And the teams that did really well developed that strategy and leveraged it early on and did it first. So they were the ones that were using that strategy and seeing a lot of success. Now you look at the teams that developed it later on, and they struggled because they didn't have the advantage of having that tool in their toolkit of things that they were leveraging. So something interesting about bots or agents when you start using them is we said they get smarter and they basically grow up with you. So there is a difference between a company that's an early adopter and starts using AI today versus one that waits 2 years. You don't drop the bots in and make up 2 years. You have to train them and they have to learn, and it takes time. So it's not like traditional automation where if you waited an extra 2 years to start automating your test suite, you could just build a framework, and once it was up, you could gain momentum and be where other people were. With AI, if you're late to the party, you're late to the party.
Yeah, your training data sets and all the learning that it does on your apps is actually done based on your specific environment, and they don't share that across the board. So you may get the fundamentals of, hey, this is a shopping cart and I understand how to do a retail app, but now specifically for your app, I need to learn and expand and grow. So Jennifer's 100% right on that you can't just jump in and say, hey, I'll throw 2 bots at it and learn twice as fast.
Right.
It's all about iterations through
and
the amount of times it spins. And the more times it runs, the better it gets, the more smarter it gets, and it's basically making educated guesses as to what it thinks it should do next based on what it's seen in the past. So the more iterations, the more combinations, the more scenarios of yours it's run, the better off they are and the more accurately they're going to predict and actually get through your application. So yeah, it's waiting. Waiting is not going to say I'll wait for a better version of a bot. They may update the bot, and they can clean up and enhance your shard and update you. Whatever tool it is, they can send in a, if they go and train in another 10,000 versions of a button, they can update your shard on that, so it has that fundamental knowledge. But the knowledge of your systems themselves, no one but you guys can actually update that and enhance that. And you could hope, maybe you could ask one of your competitors if they would share their training models, but I'm gonna highly doubt they're gonna offer that.
They probably won't hand it over, right? Because it's like, and it's like kids, right? It's like children. The bots are like your children, right? You have to have them, and you have to let them grow up, and they grow up at the pace they grow up at. It's not like all of a sudden you can adopt an 18-year-old with a bot unless someone gives you one that's 18 years old, right? So you have to have them in your environment, be leveraging them, and let them grow up, because they learn and mature as you have them. And this isn't something like where you go, oh, let's just, like Rick said, let's just wait till it's smarter. The technology is mature enough right now in what we're seeing where it's providing value, and it's riskier not to do it, in my opinion, right now than it is to, just wait. Like if you're one of those organizations that says we're super risk adverse, there isn't a lot of risk in this right now. There's places you can try it and leverage it and use it right now to start getting the advantage that you need. Because if you don't, like we said, other people will be doing it, and their bots will be learning and getting smarter as they go. So one of the tools, we told you we'd give you a tool that you could play around with to see how this works, that's free, that you don't have to pay for. One of the things we will always caveat with is our friends at Google sometimes remove a support for things without telling folks, so it can go away at any time. But there's a tool called Google AutoML, which has Vision API, so it can insert in screen captures that you take and analyze them and show you how the machine learning works, just so you get an idea of how the stats work, what some of the data is, what it looks like when you use it. So there is a URL you can go to get to this. And like I said, I can't promise it'll be there always or even day to day, because the support can go away, but it's at least a free way to go in and start playing around with this. So what you want to do if you want to play around with this basically is you want to load the Google AutoML Vision demonstration site. So you want to go to cloud.google.com/vision. So that's cloud.google.com/vision. Scroll down to like the middle of the page. Hopefully Rick's telling me if it's still there, because it could go away at any moment.
It's still there.
Okay, he's going to tell me. But you scroll down kind of the middle where you see this little thing that says try the API. And what you would want to do there is, remember when we asked you what app do you use, what website, whatever you want, you can just go in and grab a screenshot of anything. This one happens to be the Walmart app, but you could go grab a screenshot of Lyft or Uber or Facebook or whatever you want.
Even your app.
It doesn't matter. Insert it in where it says try the API. Load any screenshot. You can load different ones, see what happens, but grab whatever you want. And then you're able to see the analysis it actually does on the app once it loads in. So here's what it does, for example. Like on this one, what happened is, you'll notice on this screenshot that was used, and you can use anything, it doesn't actually say Walmart anywhere on here, but it knows with pretty good certainty over there, 0.8888, that this is a mobile app screenshot, that it's Walmart, so it guessed it's Walmart. And on bots, anything over, what would you say, Rick, is good? Because I know some of these are like 50, 53, 54.
It depends who you're talking to. A lot of the people say that anything over 50 is good. I like, that's a rough accurate to me. I'm not a fan of that number. That's what some of the books tell you, and some of the people out there are talking about. I like anything over 80 myself. Anything over 80 to me means it's pretty confident what it's seeing is accurate. And from a testing perspective, just me, without getting itchy in my brain, it's got to be over 80. Otherwise, I'm going to question it or want to double check it with my own eyes.
But you can go and play with this, see what it finds, basically understand what it's seeing, what it's finding as it goes along. So here's one of the things. These are just some questions we had, but it didn't say Walmart, but it figured out it was Walmart. It knew with pretty good certainty this was a mobile app screenshot and not a website. So it has the capability, like Rick said, it had learned, it's looked at a lot of stuff. It just knows intuitively what it's looking at with those things. It sees things like online ads, pop-ups, that type of stuff. But it will miss stuff too. They're not perfect. So again, we're not saying they're perfect and they do everything, but they do have enough value that we think that it's very beneficial to get started. And once something looks at a screenshot multiple times or an app multiple times, it gets smarter, like we said. So those percentages you saw will go up as it learns over time.
Yeah, and this was just the first swing. So it did miss stuff, and it will, and all bots will miss stuff on the first swing. And that's where we kind of help out, or where you help it out by guiding it to the next step, showing it what it missed and saying, hey, you missed, this was an actual advertisement, or this was a button that you didn't see, or you thought this was a shopping cart, but it's not. It's a very uniquely designed switch or something. And you kind of help it go. And then as it iterates, it gets way smarter, and those accuracy percentages go way, way up.
And then this is kind of cool. So this is what we look at all day long now. This is our ability to watch a bot wall basically of hundreds of apps running over and over. Because again, like we said, we don't even need the code for it to run, and picking out things that are broken. So we may even find something that's broken before someone inside the team does, because what we'll see is where you see the red popping up, the bot will find something that broke or stalled, and then we'll get a trigger and an output that basically comes to a Slack channel that says, hey, look, this broke, go check it out. So you can see what's actually going on and what some of the issues are on mobile apps that are running out there right now in the wild, which is kind of fun. And you may see your apps pop up if any of you support these, but all of them, can run, and we can have hundreds and thousands of them running all the time. And then this is a fun one too. This is an actual one we ran. So this is a mobile app. This is just a video of what the bot's doing so you can see it to give you an idea. And again, this is where I said we didn't even need the code behind this to run it. What you'll see here is normally, again, traditional automation would have a hard time with this vehicle screen because it's moving and it does things and it changes and then it pops up, right? So you'll see different things start happening on it around here, and the bot's just figuring it out when things change, when it comes in, if something's happening. So again, this works on everything. It's all industries. It's any kind of app or website that it can find and crawl and look at. It's games. It's all of that stuff. But this one, what we'll show you, the reason we're showing you this one is we'll show you what some of the output looks like. So here's what the output would look like. This is just showing you scenarios. So there's, 5 scenarios here. This is telling you battery charge level, just like battery charge on your phone. When you have low battery, that means you're in trouble. So what these mean is some of these scenarios are not performing where they should be, and they need to be updated. There's some issues in those scenarios. So again, that's that virtual research assistant giving you data on where to focus and where to go. This is giving you how many steps it took to get to just log in, and you can see how many seconds that is. Then you can compare that across your industry and say, is that good or bad? I don't know, that's pretty long. So when you start to have a lot of steps and it takes a long time, you can figure out what's causing that. So this one's actually showing you the bot crawled through these steps. You saw some of them on the screen when we just showed you the video. And what you can see is that there is what's happening. So it does gestures, it does tap, swipe, all those things. Bots can figure all of that out. And then you can see that there's one of these steps that takes a really long time. That's where you can pinpoint for developers, go in and optimize this piece right here because this isn't working. And you can do it as you do app refreshes or you're updating your mobile app or your website too to see how you're performing against your previous versions. This is actually showing you an industry compare. So again, because we can grab all of them. Remember how many steps Porsche was? It was like 13. It takes Cadillac 2 and McLaren 6. And then what you'll see too is like some of the timing, stuff like that. So you can know kind of where you sit. The interesting thing too is sometimes it tells you what you can't do against your competitors. Porsche, you can't run without an actual vehicle, whereas Cadillac and McLaren will allow you to run the app without actually having a vehicle. So in order to test this for login, you actually have to have a Porsche to be able to do it. So that's why we'll highlight it sometimes and say, hey, we can't even do this exact thing for this vehicle because it doesn't allow you to do it, should you maybe be able to. So in the end, one of the things this does, it takes that pyramid to a cake. It makes those UI tests a lot cheaper to run. You can then start shifting. Instead of just looking at manual and automated testing, you can say with AI first, what should I do using AI? Because that's going to be the least expensive way to do the testing. That's those routine things I want to be able to do. And then what do I want to keep as manual and what do I want to keep as automated? Now, something interesting, to train a bot, you don't need to know how to code. So training bots requires good functional knowledge of your systems, your apps, your websites, all of that. So all of you out there that are solid functional testers that aren't in the mode of wanting to become programmers or coders, I would suggest you look at learning how to use AI and start using it and training bots, because it will not require that coding that traditional automation requires. So in the end, what we see AI doing is being able to test workflows like humans at superhuman speed and scale. It has a lot of experience. It's stable from what we're seeing, and it's a good strategy to start looking at for your teams. These are the different types of things you could be doing with it. You can use it for, this is where we said, focus on what you want to do. It can be that voice of the customer bot that does the sentiment and pulls back information on what customers like and don't like. It can be used for mobile tests. It can be used for web tests. It can test quality of streaming, so you don't all have to sit there and watch episodes of Disney Junior all day long and test the streaming. You can have it do that for you. It can be a dashboard that gives you data and pulls information back. It can do performance testing. It can do visual diffs, so stuff that we used to have to do using localization testing, and it can actually compare documents and information on different docs. So we'll stop you guys there. We'll leave up our emails if you guys want to connect with us, and then we maybe have time for like 1 or 2 questions, Minna.
Yes, yes, Jennifer, we do have questions here. Let me just quickly get at least a couple of them done. Okay, so should I go ahead with the first question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the first question is, what benefits could AI automation bring if company tests only single banking application?
So what benefits could AI testing bring if you have a single banking app? Well, lots. So basically, in a banking app, I'm guessing you're doing some pretty routine things like checking that users can log in, checking that deposits posted to their accounts, checking that when they make withdrawals that those came out, right? There's some pretty common probably regression scenarios that you're running all the time just to validate in every environment that they're working. So what you would be able to do there is identify a nice regression suite that the AI could run in your dev environment, your local environment, your stage environment, whatever you want, and on every different form factor, whether someone's going in on your banking app on their mobile phone or doing it on a computer.
The other one is you can also use it to train the bot based on your actual business rules. So the bots would actually learn the fundamental financial rules that your application's trying to solve. And then as you move from iteration to iteration of apps and as it progresses to new versions, those same rules carry over. So that knowledge can continue to grow and carry over and save you from having to reprogram or retest or do any of that stuff that you do in the classic sense. It'll just help you jump down the pipeline and keep you faster.
Thank you. And the question here is, what could be path to transform classic UI mobile automation to AI-based automation, or can they work side by side?
I say they work actually in tandem together beautifully. So really, it's starting to look at it and saying, kind of, my thought is start looking at what the scenarios you're testing and what you've already automated and saying, can this be done by a bot? And right now, let's look at how confident are the bot? What's the percentage of accuracy our bots are currently doing? And as your bots get into that 80 to 90 range, that's when you can start to say, hey, now I can take it off of what I've done as classic automation, but I'm going to also leave certain things that don't make sense to be automated by bots. I always use the analogy of it's like hanging a picture. A bot's like a sledgehammer. You can hang a picture with it, but it's not always the right tool for the job. So for things like API testing, where you're just going to crank through back end, there isn't much need in my mind to use a bot to do that kind of stuff. And that's where classic automation technologies are just way more powerful, and they're more efficient use of time. But as far as the UI stuff, you can start looking at how do I start transferring that over, and they work together. So bots can be fired off using curl commands, just like so you can put them right in your CI pipeline, like most other people, most automation out there. So they start working together. So the bots can trigger your automation can trigger the bots. It's really just kind of more of a how do you want to run and what makes the most sense for your business.
Thank you, Rick. Since we're running out of time, I'll just take one more question, one last right now. That is, how does it handle? So I believe it here is AI based testing. How does it handle the applications which runs on the business rules? How do bots interpret rules?
So it interprets rules the same way we do. So it just has to learn them and understand them. So as it's creating the flow in that app graph, that would be just another type of a flow that you would have to help train it on. So it'd be something where you would guide it and say, this is a business rule. And then once it knows your rule, now it just needs positive reinforcement, more iterations. And once it has learned that rule becomes ingrained with it in every single step. So the rules they're a little tougher to get in because each business is independent of itself. But like HIPAA rules, there are bots that understand the HIPAA rules, and they already come preloaded understanding fundamentally what those are. And so that's one where it knows.
The other one I was going to say too, that's a good point, Rick. App stores. So we all know, any of you that work on mobile, app stores have rules that they require to get ingested into the app store. So for example, you can't have anything that covers up where the pictures are taken on the iPhone. You have to have things in certain dimensions when it renders on the screen, those types of things. You build those rules in, like Rick said, just like humans learn them. So when you're told rules, then those are what you use for your testing. Bots do the same thing. We tell them what the rules are, we train them on the rules, and then they adhere to the rules, and they tell you when the rule isn't met or when something occurred outside of the rule. So it works just like you, honestly. And then I know if there may be some other questions, our emails are on the bottom of this. Rick, Andrew, we're all happy to take questions. So if you have any, feel free to email us, and we'll try and answer more of the questions that we didn't get to today.
Yes. Guys, yeah, please feel free to email them directly if you have any comments, thoughts. You also have their Twitter handle. Reach out to the speakers. And thank you so much, Jennifer and Rick. It was a very insightful session on building test strategies for manual and automation, and mostly how AI can actually aid the same. So many thanks for sharing all the tool details. That really helps a lot. I'm sure our attendees found it very informative and useful too. So thank you again, Jennifer and Rick, and I hope to see you at STPCon soon.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll see you there.
All right. Well, everyone, this concludes our webinar for today. Thank you for joining, and more importantly, thank you for being engaging and making the most of the webinar for yourself and the whole group. If you want to see more sessions from speakers like Jennifer and Rick, wish to learn more about testing, do join us at STPCon Fall 2019. The program has been selected and announced, and you can actually look at the pricing, various registration offerings at the link given on the site. Should you still have any queries, please contact us at info@softwaretestpro.com. And stay tuned for more webinars and online trainings coming soon at softwaretestpro.com. And if you haven't yet signed up for the upcoming webinar, which is What Does Lean Software Development Mean for Testers on 11th of September, then please do it. The speaker is Michael Hackett, who is a Senior VP at Logic Air Corp. He'll be talking about what Lean is and how it applies to software development today. And we'll also focus on the impact Lean has on quality and testing. So if the topic interests you, please register for the same at softwaretestpro.com. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week ahead. See you all in Boston in September. Keep practicing your testing skills and review your test strategies this week.